Hello everyone, this is Rich and you are watching part of the Indie Plus Pound Game Night for October 2014. This is one of the panels that we do as part of Game Night, and because it's October we thought, hey, why don't we do a panel called This Game is Too Scary? Now, so you're aware, this panel does meet the Indie Plus community standards, which you can find out on indieplus.org. Now, we have two fantastic guests. One is a returning guest, and one is a first-timer, so I'm pretty excited to bring on. First of all, we have from Spectrum Games. She's made Slasher Flick as well as Macabre Tales, so she knows quite a bit about spooky stuff. Cynthia Miller. How are you, Cynthia?
Pretty good. How about you, Rich?
Fantastic, fantastic. And then we have an old hat at all the scary, spooky, gory stuff. The man behind Lamentations of the Flame Princess, none other than James Raggi. How are you, James?
I'm doing pretty good. Still conscious?
Yes, it's 4 a.m.-ish your time, I believe.
A bit after 4 in the morning here.
All right. So, just so you know, if in the middle of the panel one of the panelists nods off, we will forgive James, but not Cynthia.
Hey, I'm not going to go to sleep. Hell, I'm a night owl. 4 o'clock in the morning. If it was that here, I'd just be getting going real good. So.
All right. Now, ahead of time, I have received a number of questions from people who follow Indie Plus. So if you are interested in giving us questions ahead of time for panels in the future, please do follow Indie Plus on Google Plus. If you're watching live and we are not asking the question that is burning in your skull, the Q&A is turned on. So you are more than welcome to hop on and ask a live question, and if it is pertinent and it's something that we're not already asking, I'll make sure to do my best to prioritize it and move it up the queue. Now, with all of that said, let us go ahead now, because we have two excellent panelists here. I'm not necessarily going to call on you folks, so you answer as you feel the urge. Marshall Miller was the first question Marshall Miller asked is scary for whom? Games that are scary for whom? The players or the characters?
I try to run it to where it's scary for both. I know that sounds like an obvious answer, but I like to kind of get under the skins of the players as a game master and also as a game designer designing scary games. I like to try to integrate various things that will unnerve the players, and I think that usually will spill over into the characters, especially if there's some sort of a mechanical device in play for the game system itself.
I like to go directly at the players. Yeah, as was just said, if the players are freaked out, the characters are going to act freaked out. But if you're trying to do something where it's just for the characters and the players don't care, then it's kind of a big letdown. It's kind of like if you're doing high adventure, it's like saying, well, your characters are excited even if you, the player, are bored by all this action. That doesn't work either. So, go after the players, get them invested, and then the in-game will follow the mood of the players.
Okay, that makes sense. Tom Pleasant asked, banter is a vital part of the social activity of gaming. With that in mind, how do you encourage or maintain tone when suspense or horror is your goal?
Well, for me, honestly, a lot of it I happen to have really good groups, just by luck, but assuming otherwise, I think that it comes down to you have to sometimes interrupt with an event. Something's got to happen to cut the banter and move the story forward into the things that are more horrific. That said, I have no problem in most games, and I'll get to that in a second. I have no problem allowing for some humor to seep in. Now, if it's Lovecraftian, I get a little bit more prickly about that because, it's supposed to have that dry Lovecraftian tone. And unless it's really dark, subtle humor, it really doesn't fit in there. But like Slasher Flick and most other games, I like a little bit of humor because when something scary happens, the contrast is just hits them right in the face.
For me, well, you can't stop banter. I mean, if players are going to start just blah 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 about nothing going on at the table, then that's what they're going to do. You start little punitive measures, though, especially if there's something happening. You can just assume that for some reason the characters are all deciding, wow, that bar's mead was crap or whatever, and so if it's not a high-tension situation, then whatever. For some reason, they're wanting to spend their gaming time talking about nothing. But if it's in a tense situation and they start doing that, well then, their characters obviously aren't paying attention, so not only do you have something happen, but, you give that happening an extra penalty for the players because, well, the characters aren't paying attention because, look, you're not paying attention. So...
Nice, nice. I like that. Well, let's move to this next one. Damien Hupfeld asked, how do you build horror or suspense differently in a one-shot versus a longer series or campaign?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't do a lot of one-shots, but when I do, they tend to be my most confusing and bewildering adventures. I don't know if it creates horror so much as confusion. Because to me, part of the thing that'll make horror stick is campaign play. A lot of people, I see a lot of reviews of my stuff that, oh, this isn't so good for a campaign, it's better for a one-shot, because look at all this weird crap that can happen, it'll ruin characters, and your campaign will be... But to me, that's what makes it good for campaign play, because it's ongoing consequences to both the character and the setting. That it's not just a one and done. You're playing an adventure, and then when you show up next week, it's like that adventure never happened, except for some experience points or whatever. So you really twist it in with some awful things that can happen and that are going to stick. So that way, the players are going to act that little more cautious because there's something that's going to happen to my character, and I still have to play this character, and there's not going to be an easy fix. Crap.
For myself, I'm the exact opposite of James. I run almost exclusively one-shots. Well, for one thing, our groups don't tend to do horror consecutively. That is, we tend to, like, superhero stuff and stuff of that nature is what we usually do for campaigns. So when I run horror, and I'm usually the game master, when I run horror, I like to do it one-shot. Because I can tell the whole story in one go, and the players never know what the hell's going to happen, because I really could kill off their characters and not, and I'm sure you can do that anyway. I mean, I understand that. But at the same time, there's that immediacy. There's that, oh shit, I could be out of this whole thing right now. So I tend to go for short-term, fast impact, creep them out, scare the hell out of them, and pull out again kind of approach.
Cynthia, a follow-up on the one-shots. This is one of the questions that someone hit me with when I tried to pitch them on the idea of a game called Dread. Dread's a game where instead of rolling dice, if you are trying to do something in the game, you take a pull from a Jenga tower. And if the Jenga tower falls, then your character's doomed. Usually they die, right? And so the question that someone posed to me was, so if your character dies, what the heck do you do for the rest of the session? What do you normally do in a one-shot? If you kill somebody, say, an hour into a 4-hour slot?
Go mow my lawn.
I mean character. You kill a character, sorry.
Because otherwise you have to hide the body, and hope the cops...
Exactly. That's a whole nother panel.
No, you make the player go do chores. Your character died, you got nothing to do. Go mow the lawn, go, clean the toilet, do something useful around here now. Loser.
Okay, in my case, the two games that I run the most are, I know this is a cheap plug, but Slasher Flick and Macabre Tales. In Slasher Flick, it's kind of Well, it's a real easy fix because characters have a primary character, and then there's secondary characters that, depending on how the game master wants to run it, they each person can control one or more of those, or the characters or the players can all share the secondary characters. So, generally speaking, the secondary characters die off pretty quick. I mean, not like boom and it's over quick, but you can use them to gain what's called genre points. For doing stupid stuff, as you always see in the horror movies. The character goes off on its own, the player earns a genre point, which can be used to help keep the primary characters alive. So, the point being, for slasher flick, that's really not an issue. Toward the end of the game, you may have some players sitting on the sidelines. As for Macabre Tales, it's really designed for one player and one game master. Because most of Lovecraft's stories were indeed, one main protagonist. And so we went with that model. So if it dies in, it's just one of Lovecraft's short stories. He dies pretty early, so. And in the first act. Uh-oh.
Oh my goodness, we have someone crashing the call. How scary is this?
Look what the cat dragged in. Hi, John.
Hey, it is John Wick of John Wick Presents, who is the maker of scary games such as Shotgun Diaries and My Monster. How are you, John? Nope, we can't hear you, sir. Nope, no audio. Still no audio. Okay, John, keep trying to work on the audio. We'll drop the chat. And I'm going to move on to the first question we received live Q&A, and hopefully John can get that resolved. Jason Sarton asks, do you believe it's possible to have horror when the PCs are powerful or heavily armed? James, how do you handle high-level lamentation scariness?
Just do things that completely bypass, the usual mechanics and usual things they have available to them. I mean, if you have some monster that's not of this dimension and is not affected by physical force, then players could have all the guns and swords and axes that they want. That's not going to do anything to the monster. So that's the perfect example of that kind of thing, or one perfect example is Predator. I mean, that is, the badass special forces, group that's just taken apart by a monster.
Cool. And I think Miguel Baker has also joined us.
Yes, at last.
Yay, from Night Sky.
We're up all for lighting.
She's gone the extra mile.
Sorry about this. It's like, just it's atmospheric. Just go with it. I'm the odd glowing light. Yeah.
I'm a little
Sorry
nervous.
to be late, guys.
All right. John, do you have the audio back yet, sir? No, we still can't hear John. Oh, you might want to drop out of the hangout and try to rejoin.
I'm going to try and put a little light here. See, this is what happens when you do something about spooky everything. It all goes weird. The spirits are with us, and they are not happy about our technological whatever the heck.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to swear.
And it's okay, we have given an explicit warning, so if you want to drop some curse words, James Raggi is on the call. I'm sure you'll have support.
Oh, cool. Hey, James. We're all good.
So, Cynthia, did you have any questions or any answers for the question posed, which was how do you handle something spooky for high-level or powerful characters?
I have to absolutely agree with James on this. There are always more ways to get under the skin of the players, regardless of the players, regardless of the power levels. It's just a different sport. You obviously don't have as much physical threat, so you have to just bypass that. You have to find alternate ways, and it doesn't even have to be anything to do with their characters. It can be how you describe a scene. There was a game that I ran one time, and the characters weren't powerful, but this would have worked just as well. There was this house that they had gone into, and this was Lovecraftian horror. And there was this house that they gone into where these kids had been murdered a long time before. and there was this dust everywhere because nobody had been in this house for a long time. But there was dust except for 2 places where the 2 kids were murdered, and you could almost see their outline because it was the only clean spot. Those were the only clean spots, I should say. And then, so they were going, whoa, after all these years, dust everywhere except for where they found the bodies, and that's when the shape started moving toward them. Now, it doesn't matter if the characters are very powerful or not. That's gonna screw with them.
Yeah, and the thing about powerful characters is you can really throw some solid opposition at them that they can wipe out and gives them a false sense of security. They can think, oh, we got this one, and then, then you got him. Then you got him.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can,
Yes, we
John.
can hear you now.
Awesome.
Yay!
So the question is, I actually addressed this in one of my Play Dirty videos, which is the thing that challenges characters the most has nothing to do with their character sheet. The way to challenge characters and the way to make players scared is to ignore the character sheet. The character sheet doesn't matter. What matters is what they believe in, what they care about, all of those things that character sheets don't address. And that is how you scare people. If you have the serial killer, they're hunting down the serial killer, and the serial killer captures one of their, like somebody's mom or somebody's girlfriend or somebody's dad or somebody's brother. Your character sheet doesn't help you there. And he sends you text messages of pictures of the person that he's captured, and he's slowly cutting off fingers and toes. Make a strength roll. None of that matters. Nothing on their character sheet matters. The way to scare people, the way to get them to raise the tension of the game, is to hit them in places that their character sheet can't protect.
Another way that I think is interesting and important to scare people is ask if they want to be scared.
Yeah.
There is a very great moment in our Vincent's and My Gaming history where he asks, okay, so it's going to be vampires. Should they be vampires like, ooh, vampires, or should they be like, no shit for real vampires? And they're like, oh yeah, no shit for real vampires. Holy crap, scary, because you're scaring yourself. So one of the things, in terms of scaring players, set them up. Allow them to set themselves up. Like, if I ask you guys, all right, so is this a scary troll or not a scary troll? And you say, oh yeah, scary troll. Great, you're already playing your own mind games, and it's going to be scary. And I think that's the biggest single thing is get them scaring themselves, because we're all going to scare ourselves way more than we're going to scare each other, really, I think.
Nice. Eric Duncan had a question. This is talking a little more mechanical, because he specifically asks, what mechanical changes do you make when you run horror content in games that aren't specifically made for horror? For instance, like retooling actions like hiding, stealth, or magic.
Mm-hmm.
I take their character sheets away. Having your character sheet in front of you is a mechanic as far as I'm concerned. It's a rule, right? So I take their character sheets away. They don't know what their hit points are. They don't know what their saving throws are. They don't know anything. And that's important. So when they're like, okay, you need to make a roll for whatever, they're like, okay, what do I roll? It's like, okay, roll the standard dice you would roll. If you D20, you roll a D20. Did I make it? Don't know. I think you did. And they have no way. They have no confirmation. They have no way to confirm, what's true or not. The other way that works is that they don't know how many hit points they have. They don't know how many sanity points they have. They don't know how many willpower points they have. So they spend the last willpower. They spend a will. They say, I want to spend a willpower point, and you say, you don't have any more. That's just one thing that I do to get that going.
Also, you can flip that over and as well take away their ability to roll the dice. If the game master rolls the dice for them behind a screen, now I'm not particularly fond of using this myself, but I've seen it used effectively. They don't know what they rolled. they rolled. So they're kind of on the edge of their seats. Especially this works really good from what I've seen in Lovecraftian horror, where one of the themes of that whole genre or subgenre is that we have such little control over what happens out there that it kind of enforces that theme, I think.
I would agree with that, what Cynthia just said. For specific genres, that's really good, where the whole point is you're not in control.
Yeah.
That works very effectively. There's other types of scariness where not being in control is where that's not the whole. It's not the whole deal. I'm thinking about God, this was a long time ago. We're giving more information. All right, you're in a jungle. The jungle is on fire. There's a smell of burning flesh in the air. There is dripping. It's like dripping fire. Basically, I'm describing napalm, and I'm getting people to, by giving them every sensory detail. This is what the ground is like. This is what the trees are like. There are bodies that are burned. Your clothes are sticking to you, like melting into your skin. It's a different kind of horror, and tapping into the common things that scare all of us, not just in terms of being out of control, but it's way easier to give people imagery, give people sensory material that's nasty. If I say, you open the box and it's teeming with maggots. We all get that visual. If I say, encourage you to think about something that smells utterly revolting to you. It's horrific. It makes you want to retch. That's easier than saying, imagine you're on the beach and it's a lovely sunny day and everything is great and peaceful, but I don't know that you're freaked out by beaches and you hate swimming, so it's not peaceful at all for you. We have just things that are human in us, that are basic fears. Like it's unsafe, it's unhealthy, it's corrupt in some way. We're going to get eaten, something's going to fall on us, we're going to fall off the cliff. Things that we can tap into in a broader, easier way than everybody's pretty happy smiley face. So I think that's a flip side of that. Flip side of what John and Cynthia are saying, where take away their stuff, take away their resources, get them unstable. That's all awesome. But there's also a thing of tap into what's in the collective fear place just by being mammals.
I completely agree with that.
I'm so shocked.
Oh yeah. Well, and of course there's the standard stuff, which I came in a little late, so I don't know if you guys mentioned it or not. But the fact about lights and music and and temperature. What people don't really, when I used to run my Cthulhu game, I would turn the AC all the way up. I would make the room really, really, really cold. And that's, just that little change, changes a lot. I'm going to paste a link to everyone, which is a link to a composition by a Polish composer called and I'm going to mispronounce this, Threnody, the Victims of Hiroshima, by a composer with big Polish name that I will mispronounce. He's a very famous composer. Penderecki is his name, and Kubrick used a lot of his music in The Shining. It's very disturbing. It's atonal, and it's designed to be disturbing. And what I did with when I ran my last Halloween Cthulhu game is I turned all the lights off, just everything off, and I played this music for 10 minutes and didn't allow anyone to talk, nothing. Just sit there in the quiet, silent darkness, well, not so silent, with this music playing. And it freaked at least one person out. And it's just unsettling. And anyway, there's one of my things for that. It's it's really common, easy to do stuff. It just oh, and I remember the other thing I was going to say. John Tynes ran a Call of Cthulhu adventure called Grace Under Pressure, which takes place in a small experimental submarine that runs into something under the water without getting anything else away. And the way that he ran it was when the submarine ran into the water, the lights all turned off, and he took out glow sticks, that you break and then you shake up, and that's what everybody had to see with, was glow sticks.
Nice.
And nowadays you can just do it with your cell phone. But even that, being in the dark where you can't see everything and you have a limited light source, and every shadow looks like it's moving, that is another way to key into those, the lizard brain.
I think one of my favorite runs of Murderous Ghosts was at PAX Prime a couple of years back when John Harper and I were running it, and we were in a room that had a dimmer switch, and that was exactly the technique of just being able to get as things stepped up, it just got darker and darker and darker. It was really cool.
And again, the nice thing about all these things is it doesn't matter if you're playing a game designed for horror or if you're playing a superhero game that just has horror overtones. All these kind of things affect the players. They can be used regardless of the genre. As long as you want to make it spooky, this kind of stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
I'm often reminded of two video games that were very effective at this. One of them was the second Vampire Bloodlines video game that had a haunted house. And in the haunted house, there were no monsters. There were no opponents. There was nothing. Oh!
Hello.
There she is.
Hello.
Hey, Meg.
Trying to keep troubleshooting this. Okay. Nah.
There were
No monsters. Go on. Ignore the crazy technological weirdness. Tell me about no monsters.
There are no monsters or opponents in the entire level of the game. There is just the house, and it was incredibly eerie. It was very effective. The other one, which is easier to get a hold of, was the third Thief game for the original Xbox, Thief: Deadly Shadows, which had a haunted asylum that used to be an orphanage, and it was again. The first half of the level was walking around trying to turn the lights on. And then once you did, that was the worst thing you could have done, was turning the lights on. Because it means that now everything that's in there can see you.
Right.
The whole point of Thief is to not be seen. The whole point of the game is to move around and not be seen. Really, really fantastic. And I highly recommend anyone taking a look at both of those as a way to build tension without any dice rolls, without any kind of skill checks or any mechanics whatsoever. Just plain mood and atmosphere. It's very effective.
Oh, I could talk about scary video games for quite a while.
Clock Tower!
Believe it or not, an Aliens hack of the original Doom is one of the scariest video games I've ever played.
That sounds interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
I remember the original Alien video game that was really tense and scary, and did it, it was on my old PC. I mean, it was very, very unnerving. And again, it did it with uncertainty.
Yeah. So you guys already hit atmosphere, which is a question that Keith McGow had asked about the external elements to create an atmosphere. Other than cranking up the AC, did anyone else have any other environmental suggestions as far as creating a good atmosphere?
I'm a big fan of giving them something to look at, some sort of focal point in the center of the table. I love doing this for Apocalypse World recently. recently, a couple years ago, whatever. So you put something in the center of the table so that it cuts down on the I fidget with my phone or I fidget with my dice or whatever, because there's something engaging to look at. And if what you have engaging to look at is a broken wine glass full of matches, or some rusty car parts and some children's toys, or whatever, it gives you a sense of setting and then a way to engage a certain aspect of your brain while the other parts of your brain are figuring out what your character's doing. But it does create atmosphere in a way that goes beyond music or temperature. It adds to it, doesn't necessarily go, but adds to it. Other atmospheric things, let's see, we've covered lighting, we've covered temperature, sound, things to look at. Food could be a thing, although that almost bridges into LARP world if you're saying, okay, no snacks tonight, guys. You know, but it's possible.
Yeah.
I've had good luck with having people outside on occasion. You have the windows open, and you have a non-player, someone actually lurking around out there on occasion.
That's
I've done that
hardcore.
before. Yeah, it works. They hear something shuffle around in the leaves, I'm telling you. It puts them on edge, and then they're not sure whether to pay attention to what's going on out there or the game, but that's okay. They end up focusing on the game, and that just leaves them open for more scares outside. So.
Yeah, it's having a ringer is something else I've suggested in a lot of Play Dirty articles, which, having someone in a closet and then they just start doing this, starting scraping on the closet in the room that you're in. And people at first are like, what is that? At first they dismiss it because obviously there's no one else in the house. But then things start, if you can get people to get up from the game and go looking for something that is making noise, it's always a good thing. Always a good thing.
You gotta have a dedicated ringer there.
Yeah. Oh, I had a great ringer who sat in a closet for 2 hours.
That's
And that was worth it. It was really, really worth it, as you might imagine.
I'm doing this atmosphere thing all wrong then, because I play. I play early afternoon in front of the balcony door and window. And my
but that's
wife
creepy as hell. You can work that.
Yeah, you can work that. Then my wife's always got fresh baked stuff that's in the center of the table, so when they get there, it's like, ooh.
But this goes right back to what we were just saying about having nothing going on in the first level, or how creepy it is. To just like there's nobody here. What's going on? Because what you're looking at then is drawing out the anticipation before you hit what the gotcha moment is, what the shock is. Oh no, it's fine. It's all fine. Everything's fine. It's a lovely afternoon. Having that be the setup in like things going terribly wrong in Dogs in the Vineyard game. It's a beautiful day. The sky is sweet. I'm reminded of the parts of what was it? I Am Legion? Is that the one? Where there's like these beautiful scenes of devastated post-apocalyptic New York of like deer and little bunnies and meadows and things, and then eventually there's zombies. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that slow build and anticipation thing. Mm-hmm. The players I have now have been with me for a few years now, so they're so jaded that the horror comes with just how much they disregard everything going on, and then someone will think, "Guys, this is really screwed up. Have you noticed?" Oh yeah, shit. Yeah. But it's fun seeing my stuff out in the wild and how other people react. Because what you say about the slow build, no atmosphere. For Deathfrost Doom, I've got a small stash of saved emails where people tell me they did they ran the adventure, their players did the mountain, do the cabin, and when they get when they find the trapdoor down to the dungeon, they go, oh hell no, and they leave. and usually they're not very happy because they paid for the adventure, they wanted to run the adventure, and before there was any threat, before any chance of any harm coming to them, the players all decide that they can't take their pretend people into the pretend place to have pretend adventures. No way, they're going to go do something else. And I just think, how cool is that?
I also wonder. I wonder about the age of their players in that case, because I have noticed as I get older and as the people I play with get older, younger. There's like this space where people are really willing to throw their characters into danger, and then there's places on either side of that where not so much. It's like, yeah, I'm good. We're out. I don't need to go mess with that. I find that to be a very interesting place.
I tried an experiment once where I ran just a typical D&D dungeon crawl as a horror game.
Yep.
I mean, all the same techniques that I used for running Call of Cthulhu. This was in college when I was running Call of Cthulhu regularly, and somebody said, you run Call of Cthulhu really well, but you can't run D&D. So I ran D&D as a Cthulhu adventure, and they came up to the entrance of the dungeon, and it smelled rotten. It smelled like spoiled fruit, and there's a corpse in the beginning because there's a trap right at the very beginning where a big spike thing comes down, and there's a fresh corpse that's half eaten by animals, that's still impaled on the thing because the chap hasn't reset yet. His skin's all pallid, and blah 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 blah, and they're all like, what is this?
Surprise!
And they reset the trap, and it pulled flesh up from the corpse, and I was just as livid as I could be. Everything was and I tried to describe everything like the scum on the walls of the dungeon from all the black mold that had grown there because the dungeon's all wet and it's humid, and when you breathe you can feel your lungs starting to fill up with liquid because it's just so humid and it's hot, and the armor is sticking to your skin, and I think they got like within an hour, and they're like, no, let's go home. Let's go back to the town. I was like, I win!
The whole conceit of Dungeons & Dragons, if you just think, okay, here are people that are going to go into a dark hole in the ground, going to fight all sorts of supernatural monsters, trying to get a few coins. The entire thing is horror front to back. Especially if you actually go to a cave or go, to an old castle, go somewhere where it's pitch black and you just have, just take a lantern, an actual lantern, and think about how much you can see. You can't see shit.
Yeah.
And then think there are things in there that can see, and they want to kill you, and they're big and nasty with the claws, and it is a complete horror show.
I think didn't you just describe Torchbearer? Didn't you just totally describe Torchbearer?
Yeah.
The cool thing about all this is Dungeon Crawl in particular. It's all about the tone. You can run it as horror. It's a different. I mean, if you look at the original Legend of Zelda game, it's technically you have dungeon crawl stuff in there. Is it frightening? No, not one bit. It's pretty cute, pretty fun, especially for back then. But then on the other hand, you have, say, Ravenloft, where you can go into dungeon and everything is more horrific. So it's all about the tone. You can run anything as horror. I'm convinced of that.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, it was one of the big deals when they ran into the animated skeletons. And the animated skeletons have their old armor on them, and a rat comes out of one of their eyes, and the whole thing. And they said, we attack. And I said, and like you said, I said, okay, who's holding the light? I went, what? I said, who's holding the light? You need the light. Who's holding the light? And they're like, no one ever, our DM never made us, Yeah, but someone's holding the light.
Yeah, and that's completely like just a what do you want for realism? And it goes right up with how scary do you want to be? Like, can you go through a dungeon for 6 days without eating or sleeping? I don't think so. Unless you want to. Like, that's certainly a game that happens.
Yeah, we're gonna camp out in this dungeon room.
Yeah.
Great idea.
We make camp.
Great idea.
We've killed the kobolds, and now we make camp.
Amongst their corpses.
Yeah. Somebody stacks them up, and we make a fire.
So speaking of camp, I ran a Cthulhu game once at a camp, out in the middle of the wilderness, in a forest, with a campfire, and I ran Call of Cthulhu out in the woods. And that was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had as a GM, because the whole world is on your side.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody, and I still remember to this day, one of my players was like fidgeting, and I went, "What's wrong?" He says, "I really gotta pee, but I don't want to go out in the dark."
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, running a horror game outside, in depending on where you are, right? If you're in the inner city and you go out to the park at night, you don't want to go there, but
yeah, you do. That'd be fantastic. That's serious horror. You could pick your park and go for it.
Yeah, that's real horror. Someone once told me this. They said, "John, when are you gonna write a real horror game?" And I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "When are you gonna write your prison game? That's real horror." And I went, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then of course they didn't need to because Oz came out. It was right around the time that Oz came out. And I was like, "Yeah, that's horror. That's horror right there."
I ran a horror game outside, well, partially outside. It was live action, but I'll tell you, when those tentacles came up under the old train bridge, I've never seen so many adults take off running in my life. You thought the cops were after them and they had drugs in their pants or something. I mean,
I still remember at Gen Con many years ago when Chaosium still had Cthulhu revivals, and everyone was chanting "Ya Ya," and suddenly the lights went out, and Cthulhu showed up. And it was, now I can tell you now, but what it looked like is it was a pair of huge glowing eyes, and there were tentacles grabbing people, and all it was a tent, right? It was a tent with lanterns put on it, and people, with tentacles on poles, doing this, but the lights were out, and nobody knew any different, and there was such panic in that room. Such panic. Because everyone was doing the chant, and everyone was stomping their feet, and they were, getting into the whole mob thing, and that whole atmosphere was dropping over the place, and then the lights went out and Cthulhu showed up, and I guarantee you for at least one moment, at least one person in that room went, "Holy shit, it's all real."
So I have a question there about containment. Like, what do you do after that? Because that's awesome and that's powerful, but that is actual ritual elements.
Yeah.
And what do you do for containment after that to bring people through that space so that they're back in normal, like regular space? Because you said a very key word there about mob. And what I don't want, like, I love to run murderous ghosts for 100 people at a convention. It's great fun. But what I don't want to have happen is have someone actually freak out. It's fine with me if you get so scared you have to leave the room. Okay, that's fine. But I don't want to push to the point where people actually flip out. So that's an interesting thing with big games like that, big situations, is to think about if you're running horror, if you're running something spooky, you want to, I think, pay attention to getting people into that. Yeah, I'm going to be freaked out. Yeah. Bring it on. Yeah, scare me. Holy crap, I'm scared. Okay, I was scared and now I'm good again. And make sure that you're paying attention to both steps, because I think there can be a tendency as a GM to say, I want to scare him, how do I scare him, go, and how do I scare him? But there's a flip side of that too. Like, I want them to be scared in an awesome way so that when we hang out afterward, we can't stop talking about how awesome it was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a point on that.
I'm a sadist. I'm a sadist. I'm cool with whatever. I had a player one time.
Yeah, but you got to make sure that everybody else
knows
where you are. in that way. Yeah, go
I've
ahead.
The worst I've ever had was honestly someone hyperventilate, and that was in '92. And they were like, they had to have a paper bag, and they were just like freaking out. That was the worst I've ever experienced in terms of that. So I guess I'm okay with stuff like that. Now, if they like have a severe panic attack, that's a whole different matter. But.
Right, and that's my point. Like, there's an awareness thing there. Of, like, it's cool if you come into my game and you want to be scared and you can get a good scare going on. That's awesome, but I don't want people to still be like panic attack. I don't want to actually send somebody into a place where they're messed up for the rest of the convention or whatever. So.
Well, that's a tricky thing because you can't, I mean, it sounds dismissive and I don't mean it that way, but you can't read minds.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get that, and I wouldn't expect you to, and that's not the point I'm going for. I'm just looking at pay attention to how you're bringing them through the whole experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's part of your job as the GM is to watch.
Yeah.
And to read the audience.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm going to move on to another question. Eric Duncan and Felicity Graham both asked very similar questions. I really want to hear from the panelists on this one. There's a difference between gross out, horror, and terror. Which do you prefer and find easiest to get to at the table? I want to start with you, Cynthia.
Gore is the easiest to me. It's a matter of just describing things in a way that's, it can gross them out. That's superficial, and I've never had a problem with that. I think terror is the hardest because, these are gamers who know that they're in a horror game. They're conditioned. They know, hey, we're here to be scared. We're going to be scared. So I think really evoking that takes the most work. And so that's where I stand on it.
Cool. James, what would you say between the three, gross out, terror, and horror?
Well, gross out is certainly easiest. Some players. One of my current players, I mean, his job is preparing corpses. So, he's always correcting me on shit. So
that's awesome.
Take me off that. Yeah. The terror and the horror, it's a lot easier. Well, it's a lot easier when it's a new player. This is, get your freak out on. Because, again, this group I'm playing with, it's been years now, and it's the same thing. If you watch, the first time you watch a horror movie, it's, oh my God! When you watch your 100th horror movie, it's like, yeah, that's cool. So it's maybe I should do more one-shots with people. but the gross out is definitely easiest to go for because you can do that without the player's permission. You can spring something on them, and they can be in a completely different frame of mind, and if you get the description right, if you activate their senses right, you've got them. Whereas horror and terror, that needs buy-in from the players. If they're doing all the table banter, if someone's checking their phone, it's really a lot harder to get them and keep them and put them in place. They've got to be they've got to be cooperative with that, and then at a certain level, if they're cooperating with that, then it's sort of like a one-step remove fear, I think. So yeah, I like to think of a good gross out. I think visually in terms of gross out first, and then I try to work backwards. Okay, what's the situation where this gross out makes sense, where this is the right thing to happen, and that usually ends up in a situation that's more screwed up than whatever splayed guts, what was the original inspiration for it.
Mm-hmm.
John, did you have anything different you wanted to add there?
No, I think that folks have pretty much said what I was going to say.
Cool. Meg?
I completely disagree. The scary game that I run most is Murderous Ghosts, which is all about terror and horror and anticipation. And there are absolutely flashes of like, oh my God, this is gross. But like James just said, there's a part where there's like a build up and a reveal. At least, even if you didn't say that, that's what sticks in my brain. Anyway, the point is, the creating the atmosphere, asking them, okay, what's the worst possible thing that could happen in this situation? You know, the ghost is engaged with you. What's the worst possible thing that could happen? It could touch you. It could say your name. It could look at you. It could smell you. Whatever. And I'm asking you, what is the worst possible thing that could happen here? So I'm engaging you, either it's a one-on-one or if it's a multiplayer game. I'm engaging you. You're telling me what's scary, and then I'm going to go, awesome. Let's see if that happens. Yes, it happens. It does that exact thing that you were so scared it was going to do. Now it's doing it. So the gore comes in flashes. There's a lot of in the darkness in Murderous Ghosts because sometimes you use your flashlight. So for me, running scary stuff, spooky stuff is definitely about creating an atmosphere where it's terrifying, where you don't know what's going to happen, where you don't know when the gore is going to show up, when there's going to be that little flash of reveal of the matted hair and clumps of blood in the drain and something dripping from the ceiling and it's on your shoulder. You don't know when that's going to show up because it could be any time.
Cool. Okay. This is a question from Trey Grisby. I'll stick with you, Meg, on this one. What, other than we kind of talked about the panic attack, that kind of thing, what elements about should a GM avoid when running a scary game?
What elements? Well, the thing that immediately comes to my mind is cheap shots. Unless you're doing a set piece of like, oh, it's a madman in the closet, or which, no offense to the earlier closet thing, because if you can get a ringer to do that, that's great. I don't know. It's a little hard to answer that without tripping over into, don't go for cheap tropes of, oh, there's a woman in a icebox, or there's a terrible voodoo, black voodoo king gonna curse your, that's, come on. You can be more creative than that. But that's just in terms of storytelling and being aware of, just aware of what you're doing. But in terms of player care, which I think is where the question is going to, like, what should the GM be aware of? I think that John had a point there. Like, you just got to pay attention. You really have to pay attention to what, like, your job as a GM. Sure, give them a good scare. Push them as hard as they all feel like being pushed, but you have to watch and know where that is. And definitely have the full picture in mind. And that's part of what James was just saying. Like, when you got your gross out, if that's where you're going, figure out the before and after, and make sure that that there's a reason for what you're doing. You're not just throwing gross stuff at them for no reason. Anything else specifically running? That's all I got right now. I might have more to say on that after the other guys.
I'm gonna jump over to James then. James, what should a GM avoid?
I think that's going to be determined before play begins. There's got to be some agreement as to tone or where. I mean, if people are expecting a good old Halloween thing in the vein of old Hammer horror, they're going to have different expectations than if you're thinking, I just saw Human Centipede last week, and let's have a go. And I don't know why I use that example, because Human Centipede isn't even that bad if you actually watch it, but it's got the reputation that you say Human Centipede, everyone's like, oh my god, that's one of those movies. Yeah, okay. But I guess that's an expectation thing. It's Human Centipede's no big deal to me, but you just set the expectation. I mean, if I say, these are the movies I watch, and that's, and I'm, going to use that or potentially use that in the game, people will know that, okay, maybe this guy's weird and I don't want to play with him. So, which is fair. But you set that, it's like we're going to have this kind of game, this kind of game, or this kind of game, because just saying horror, there's an incredible range of horror out there. And, you just do some name dropping of other things that you like, things that you want to go for, and people will at the very least be in that right frame of mind. I mean, if people are... Because even if you're thinking you're going to do like a slasher in the woods thing like Friday the 13th, and you give them Hostel, that's still two types of violence that's really going to rub people differently. So just up front say, okay, anything goes, and I mean anything goes, and yeah. And once you do that, then it's on the player to decide, okay, I'm comfortable or I don't trust you, and yeah, there you go.
Cynthia, anything else a GM should avoid when running a scary game?
A couple of things. One is less about player care, and that is tired cliches without a twist. I find that will ruin the mood. Now, if it's like slasher flick, those are fun because everybody knows that slasher flick is not really a horror game, just for me to you guys. Everybody knows this. It's really a celebration of the genre. So you can throw in the cliches and everybody gets a good belly laugh and it works, but if you're really trying to evoke horror, tired cliches have to have a twist. So there's that. The other thing that I would say is excessive breaks. I play a lot. My group has a lot of smokers, and I understand that. But if you have a lot of breaks, the more breaks you have, the more it pulls them away from the suspense and pulls them out of the mindset that you've worked so hard to establish. So I would say limit breaks is a very key thing.
I would say time your breaks carefully. I agree. Like, that's a brilliant point. Really, really dead on point. And then I would follow up and say, like, to time your breaks carefully if you're jamming a horror game, because that can tie right in with the environmental stuff, like John was saying, with temperature and so on. If you know the arc of your game, you can say, all right, let's take a break and let's come back in 10 minutes and know that where you're going to hit the ground running after that, instead of just having people come in and out on time or breaks whenever. I think that's a really good point for a horror game. Because then you can do like the cliffhanger thing of like the door creaks open and you hear the music rise and there's like, and let's take a break. And you're like, oh crap, So you can.
That's how I always do it.
Yeah. Better to break on the rising tension than on the falling tension. Yes.
You make them want to get back to the table, and so it kind of keeps them,
Yep.
brisk.
Yep.
Very cool. John, any other don'ts for a scary GM?
Avoid comedy. It's incredibly easy for people to, and it's natural for people to want to use comedy to break tension.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that, I picked my words very carefully there, which was avoid. It's not to say that you shouldn't ever use comedy or you shouldn't ever have a tension-breaking moment, but what gamers do, and this is just the way that we are, is that we quote Monty Python movies, we quote Star Wars, we quote, and the line I always use is, "It's only funny when John Cleese does it. Shut up." I mean, yes, I can quote the entire Monty Python Holy Grail movie too. It's not an impressive feat, and just be quiet and please focus on the game. All too often, it's human nature to want to do that, and you have to encourage your players to try to avoid it and focus on the game rather than fall into the basic gamer habits that we have. This is a different kind of game. It has different kind of rules, not just the rules on your character sheet, but has different table rules. And one of the rules is, one of my table rules anyway is no Monty Python. So you do Monty Python, you get no pie. So that's just one of the rules anyway. But yeah, avoid humor and discourage it if you can.
I find that really interesting because there's a part there where I use that as a gauge of when it's being effective. If I'm running a scary game and we're going through and someone cracks a joke, I know I'm touching something, and I can definitely say, all right, if it's getting out of hand, then yeah, like, all right, come on, let's really. But I like to definitely avoid it myself as a GM. I think that is really strong. But to notice when your players are doing it, for me, that's an indication of, all right, someone's a little nervous, and if you're playing a scary game, it's okay if you're a little nervous.
And I think that humor has its place in doses, even in horror. And it depends on if it's kind of out of character or in. For example, a few years ago, I was running a Macabre Tales game where it took place on a Titanic-like ship, And without going into a whole lot of details, because there's a lot of those, the crew ended up, and everybody on the boat except for the players ended up they just gone. Nobody knew where they were. So one of the players would decide to go up to the captain's cabin. It was late at night, and all the electricity had gone out. So he had gone up to there and went inside because nobody answered. And, well, the ship lurched, and he fell over a couch, and laying right next to him was the dead captain. And he looked like he'd been dead for years. They'd just seen him earlier in the evening, but he looked like he was dead for years. And so he's like, he freaked out. He failed his freak out check, and the player was legitimately kind of creeped out anyway. So his character was like trying to get that door open. And then he heard things out there, so he decided to go for the other. He's going to borrow that stuff, And so he's trying to borrow it, and he turns around to grab for a chair, and the captain was standing right behind him, just standing there staring at him with empty, hollow eyes. And he goes, so he looks at the guy and goes, "Do you mind?" And that
That's
worked.
great.
It created a good, and then it was juxtaposition for the horror. Everybody got a good laugh, but then it was like right back in. I think that it can be used okay in situations.
Yeah.
But what you said there, though, Cynthia, was that is beautiful in character tension break.
Exactly.
Which is very different than what John's talking about with let's spout Monty Python for an hour.
Oh,
yeah, I got a thing at my table where somehow the players will always do the wrong thing, and everything will go straight to hell. And the worse things are in the game, with the brutality of the just shit exploding, the worse it is in game, the harder everyone around the table is laughing, and I know there's at least one player that just likes to push all the buttons just to see what blows up, but the other ones, even when they're being careful and they're okay, we got to do this, let's get this right, and then somebody does absolutely the wrong thing, and the blood starts flowing, and everyone just starts breaking down because they can't believe they did that one stupid thing. That it creates a domino effect, and whatever plans anyone had for the session are now out the window. Everything is just now completely nuts. And it just has this reaction where everyone just breaks down. I mean, tears, laughing sometimes. And so I guess what I'm saying every time I open my mouth now is I have a real problem with table atmosphere, because I got a bunch of people that just are a little too into cooperating with all the bad stuff, I guess. So I mean, any techniques of trying to keep the atmosphere breaks as soon as something really bad happens, because then there's no more control. There's no actual horror. It's just a complete break in the other direction. Like that's the player character connection just goes completely. You know, the character goes to pieces and the player goes to pieces too. So, well, I guess not so different then, but.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, we have come up to the hour, and I do have one last question that I'd like to ask. It's slightly modified from what Shannon Mack asked. Think of the games that you run, and this may not be fair, but I've got you here anyway. Think of the games that you run, especially for those of you like James who have adventures or modules. What's one of your favorite to run, and why? Could be the system does a certain thing, or that particular module does a certain thing. And so, yeah, I'm just curious. You know, if people want to walk away from this panel and say, all right, I'm going to run out and buy X, or I definitely want to dig up Y because I have it, and now this is a great recommendation. What would you put out there?
Do you mean specifically spooky games?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, I would happily run Murderous Ghosts all the time. It's a great one-on-one. It's a great two-player game. It's how we originally designed it. It works great as an audience participation game for a couple people playing sort of the roles of it, and then 6 to 200 people in the audience participating. That is great. It goes crazy places. It gets really frightening and bizarre and creepy and messed up, and that would be the spooky go-to game for me.
I'm buying it now.
Yay!
My standard go-to is Call of Cthulhu, although as the years have passed, I use less and less of its system and more of its themes and philosophy. I learned how to game master from playing Call of Cthulhu in the first edition, which I have right here. The very first role-playing game I ever bought, right here. In the rules, it says break the rules to scare the players. And it was because of that. It was like, it was explicit. It says there, right there. Sometimes rules get in the way. If the rule gets in the way of creating an effective atmosphere, ignore the rule and maintain the atmosphere. And it was because of that over the years I've slowly ditched all of the rules. But yeah, I would recommend Call of Cthulhu only because actually reading it, and because there's like the cliche of Cthulhu, which is you go insane or die, and that's it. That's all that happens in Cthulhu. And then there's the actual literature. There's the Lovecraftian literature and all the rest of it. That's really rich and has got some really good stuff and some really bad stuff. But that's what I would recommend. Is my standby. But there are other horror games too. But that's the one I always go to.
James or Cynthia?
Well, I'm going to come off as such a shield for myself, but I really do design games that I want to play. So of course, Macabre Tales and Slasher Flick, so I have to choose between the two. I'm going to go with Slasher Flick because I think it does things that no other game that I've played does. God, that sounds really pompous, and I don't mean it that way. I'm just saying...
Own it!
Go for it!
What I'm just saying is... you play more than one character. Some of those characters are usually shared between the other players. You help each other make those secondary characters. That creates a sense of togetherness. And it's a lot of fun to do. Plus, the kill scene mechanic specifically creates tension. Even if you're having a bad night as a game master, you can be blowing it and fumbling your words, kind of like I just did. And still, you're going to come up with really dramatic, edgier kill scenes because of it. It can be over in one hit, one chop of the axe, or it can devolve into a huge chase sequence, just like in the movies. So there's that. And lastly is the fact that the first half of the game is basically, usually, the way I run it anyway, a teen romp. You know, and if you look at a lot of those the first part is, you know, you get to know the characters. Here are the guys that are going to die. You know, you kind of start to figure out who's who, and that's when the horror begins. And so that's usually, so yeah, it's my go-to game. I've ran it more than probably any other of my games. So
Nice. James.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to do the shill thing,
No, if it's the honest question. So, James, no, if it's the honest answer.
well, yeah, the single adventure I probably run the most was when I was doing the convention tour with the Monolith from Beyond Space and Time, and the way that the adventure ran was just so much more than I thought it would be. You know, it had the structure that I thought, you know, the beginning where everybody is just confused and doesn't know what the hell's going on. Then they figure out what's going on, and then they do everything they can to not do the conclusion, because they and the desperation there. But what happens between the knowing and the desperation was just so much more than I ever thought it would be. There's a head in a jar that's involved in the adventure, and there was one player that I was impressed because she was some high-level biochemist with some lab in real life, and there was the player once another player had decided that this head was evil, we got to get rid of it, and just smash this thing on the floor. And so then this other player, you know, the biochemist player, has her character freak out, and character dives on the floor and starts eating the brains off the floor.
wow.
and it made sense to do that, but that situation, I mean, that freaked me out. That made me stop, and it's like, holy crap, what have I made these people do? And just for that moment right there, I mean, I don't think I've ever freaked myself out with something I've run like that. You know, that. But every time I've run it, it's the same thing. Once people get desperate and trying to figure out how to safely end the scenario, they start doing these weird and wild things, and it just sometimes it's destructive, sometimes it's self-destructive, sometimes you start seeing the despair in the player's eyes, because at some point they figure out what has to be done, and nobody wants to do it. And that's to me total success right there as far as running an adventure.
Yeah, boy, that is great. I'm a little surprised that no one talked about that adventure where your character is an ex-hitman, which is awesome, except you find out that you're being played by Keanu Reeves. Anyway, John Wick, so thank you all for coming on This Game's Too Scary panel. Cynthia Miller of Spectrum Games, James Raggi of Lamentations of the Flame Princess, John Wick of John Wick Presents, and Miguel Baker of Night Sky Games. Thank you all for your expertise and your time.
A lot of fun.
And then one last chill from me. We are having a subscriber drive. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, I think I point to the upper left-hand corner and say, click on the button. Please subscribe to our channel. We've got a goal going on for October, and if we hit 350, Shoshana Kessick is going to pitch into a little anthology of supplements and stuff we're going to be throwing out free to our subscribers. If we hit 400, John Wick might be writing something for us, so please do.
Think about chess.
Yeah, chess is not an RPG. The RPG sounds like the awesomest game that has yet to be written. You have to unlock it, people. We're at 332 as of this recording. Help us hit 400 and beyond. Thank you all so much for being on the panel, and hope everyone has a fantastic Halloween.
Thank you.
No!